So I actually have a lot I'd like to share with you today. So I'm going to begin since we are right at 12:30, a little 12:31 to be exact. So welcome everyone. My name is Cassidy Alvarado, and I am the director for the Office of National and International Fellowships. And I like to call this a boot camp because I'm going to give you a crash course in fellowships and what the Office of National and International Fellowships provides for our students and alumni. So let's go ahead and begin. So what is the Office of National International Fellowships, or ONIF as we fondly call it, because of course it is a long name. We help students, both undergrad, graduate, and alumni, both identify awards and apply for awards. Now, these are opportunities very broadly defined. We call fellowships, scholarships, fellowships, grants, but generally speaking, these are competitive opportunities external to LMU. So nothing that LMU is awarding the funding for. And I'm going to give you some specific examples that, in fact, in today's presentation, all the examples are available to graduate students. Some are discipline specific, some have other eligibility requirements, but I am highlighting some specific examples of opportunities that my office supports. So as the director, I've actually been with LMU since 2017, and I'm also a current doctoral student at LMU in their Educational Leadership for Social Justice program. So if anyone is considering that program or exploring it, I'm graduating this spring. In fact, I just successfully defended my dissertation on Tuesday, so I'm happy to share my experience with that specific program in the School of Education. So before we continue, I'd like to learn a little bit about the attendees today. I have a quick poll with only 2 questions, pretty simple. So the first question is, which college or school are you considering? Just so I have a sense of who's with me today. And then the second one is, have you ever applied for a competitive scholarship or fellowship? So we'll give you all about 30 seconds or so to answer that. Ooh, loving the many students from different colleges, or prospective students for different colleges and schools. Wonderful. Okay, we'll give a few other folks a couple minutes, couple seconds to respond. All right, if you didn't get a chance to respond, this again is just a casual poll. So let me go ahead and share the results so you also can see. So it looks like we have a nice mix of students, considering different programs at LMU. So like I said, please feel free to at the end, we'll have a Q&A if you have specific questions about fellowships. But these opportunities really are geared for all disciplines and backgrounds. Now, of course, they're going to be ones that are very discipline specific, but my job is really to help you identify those opportunities that might be appropriate for your goals and your future plans. So I am also going to share these slides with you, so you will have a copy of all the different links if you want to check them out. Most of them directly link to my website or ONIF's website. And so we do offer quite a few services, including just some information about different fellowships through this bi-monthly newsletter we call Funding Friday. I do one-on-one and group appointments with students. I support students with their writing for these applications, different events, info sessions, and workshops throughout the year and into the summer as well. And then what I am especially proud of are our student spotlights or alumni spotlights. And you'll see these, like I said, throughout the presentation. James, or Will, he goes by Will, who is a graduate of our School of Education, Master's in Urban Education program. He is currently a Fulbright English teaching assistant in Spain. Yes, even during a pandemic, he actually left in January, and he's currently teaching in Spain. And we're going to be highlighting his experience in Spain in the next week or so with his spotlight. So you can keep a look out for that on our social media. But like I said, you'll see these different spotlights not only in the presentation, but you can read more about our students who have received some of these fellowship opportunities. So as I mentioned, fellowships, I use that term very interchangeably because a lot of opportunities, you might call it a scholarship, they might call it a grant. Sometimes there's an internship or an experience component. And so there's not a real clear-cut definition for what makes it a fellowship or not a fellowship. When in doubt, ask, reach out. I'm happy to let you know if that's something that my office would support. But there are scholarships for graduate students that my office does promote and support. And generally these are going to be opportunities that fund tuition, fees, room and board, some other possible expenses. So Bridget here was a critical language scholar to Japan back in the summer of 2019. This is the Critical Language Scholarship is a program that is also open to eligible graduate students. It's a summer language immersion program. And so that is something that my office definitely supports. And it is quite competitive. If you're selected, as Bridget was, it's fully funded. So she had her travel, her room and board, and the tuition for the summer program all covered through this Critical Language Scholarship. So that's something to consider if you're interested. Then we have fellowships, and I like to try to split these into two categories because fellowships may just be a scholarship. So it could have fellowship in the name, but it's funding tuition, fees, maybe books or room and board. Typically fellowships in this first category or category A are referring to graduate school funding. So for you prospective students here, looking at fellowships is very appropriate. However, there are some organizations that have been using fellowships to describe undergraduate funding. So just when in doubt, read that eligibility. If you do have questions, you can reach out directly to the funding organization, or like I said, I'm happy to answer questions, but most of the time it should refer to graduate funding. And I like to point out Nikki here because she's one of my cohort members in our doctoral program. She just won this year a Pulitzer Center Teacher Fellowship, where she got to do this virtual program with the Pulitzer Center, having access to different journalists that she could then incorporate what she learned into the classroom. So something like that is more of what is more under category B. So this is more experiential learning, maybe career placement. It might be, think of it as more of an advanced internship type opportunity. It could be a few months, it could be up to 2 years. In Nikki's case, this was a virtual program. I believe she finished at the end of fall semester. And most do include either a salary, a stipend, so some sort of financial compensation for your time. And then if it is a year or more, it probably includes health insurance and other benefits, vacation, just as if it was a traditional job. So like I said, it's difficult to truly define what a fellowship is and what my office supports, because it does cross over into career professional development, which I believe you had a session earlier today with our CPD staff. It also crosses over into research. So there are some research grants and research funding that falls under this fellowship category. And so it isn't this beautiful, like clear cut line of what is or is not a fellowship. But ultimately, what I'm trying to do is help you identify opportunities that are going to contribute to your goals. And that's a little about the terminology. Last sort of terms that you might come across, I already mentioned grants. Grants are sometimes used interchangeably with fellowships. A lot of times grants do fund research specific activities. So if you come across those, they may fall through my office as well. You might also come across fellowships that require a service commitment or has some sort of service requirement. For instance, there's the SMART Scholarship for our Seaver folks. It's managed by the Department of Defense, and the SMART Scholarship will provide you tuition funding. It's very generous tuition and additional funding for cost of living, but in return, they do expect you to work for the Department of Defense. And I believe it's a one-to-one commitment. So for every year of the scholarship you receive, you are expected to work for the Department of Defense for a year. So with those instances, and there aren't, it's not an extensive list of service commitment fellowships, but they are out there, and it's always just important to understand what it is you're agreeing to, and what happens if you don't fulfill the requirement. Spoiler alert, most of the time it means you have to pay back that money. So just keep that in mind if you come across a fellowship that has a service commitment or requirement, that you are ready to take on that responsibility. And then I just like to talk briefly about status with these competitive fellowships. Making it to the semifinalist, alternate, honorable mention stages is a huge accomplishment. These are statuses that you would definitely put on a resume or CV. You could talk up in an interview, because it's a big deal. And so you will come across sort of these different stages for certain fellowship opportunities like the Fulbright. So Fulbright has a semifinalist status, an alternate status, which Hallie here is a perfect example of an alternate. This means she initially wasn't selected as a finalist, but someone else who dropped out of the competition allowed her to move up. And so she actually also left in January, and she is currently teaching English in Spain. So getting to the alternate, there's always a chance you could still get that opportunity. Honorable mention again is a huge accomplishment for these types of competitive fellowships. So don't be too discouraged or disappointed if that's where your status lies at the end of the competition. These are still amazing achievements. And then non-select means you're most likely not moving forward. So one thing I want to talk about, and if you attended any events by LMU's Financial Aid Office, they might have already mentioned Scholarship Universe. It is a service through the Financial Aid Office. It's sort of like a database that our LMU students can create a profile, answer questions, and will match them to scholarship opportunities. This is completely different than what my office provides. My office is generally focusing on more competitive opportunities. Generally, these are going to have maybe take longer to apply because the applications will be more time intensive. And so, this is Scholarship Universe is a great tool if you're looking for funding for LMU tuition. Again, there are certain fellowships that will also support LMU tuition at the graduate level, but for the most part, the turnaround time is quite long for these competitive fellowships. And so if you are looking for something a little bit more urgent, something like this could be a good tool to help you identify some scholarship funding. So in short, we have multiple offices and support services on campus that can help you identify possible funding paths. So just a little bit of advice. One important note to remember is that these fellowships, because they are competitive, usually you're competing against students from across the US and possibly even internationally, it's more than just money. So if you are fortunate enough not to need sort of the financial benefits that come with some of these fellowships, keep in mind that these can open doors. These can lead to future job opportunities. If you're planning to do further education beyond, graduate programs at LMU, say at the PhD level, it could definitely make you more competitive for PhD programs. So keep that in mind. These do come with more than just money. As I mentioned, for the opportunities that my office supports, they are the application process is much more time intensive, and the funding timeline is longer than most students realize. So a lot of these fellowships take more than a year to fund from the time you hit submit. So for instance, I've mentioned the Fulbright several times in this session already, with some of the examples of Hallie and Will, who are both teaching English on a Fulbright. They had to apply start the application a full year and a half before they were even planning to go abroad. And so it does take some time to sort of switch that mentality and realize, okay, I need to really plan ahead for these opportunities. So if you're planning to, say, start at LMU in the fall of 21, that day one, you really need to hit the ground running if you're looking into fellowship opportunities. And that's where I'm happy to come in and help you identify those right away when you begin your studies. At the very least, you should try to start these applications at least 2 months before the deadline. But as I mentioned, some of them need to be started, full year, possibly prior to the application deadlines. And it does depend from fellowship to fellowship. So my best piece of advice is just let's talk it through when you're at LMU. Let's figure out a plan for these specific fellowships that you might be interested. For letters of recommendation, I usually say 4 to 6 weeks. Give your recommenders as much notice as possible. Recommendations for for fellowship applications, they aren't going to be just a standard sort of boilerplate, this student is great. A lot of times the letters of rec can make or break an application. So you want to give your recommenders as much time to really craft thoughtful, detailed letters on your behalf. And then lastly, expect to compose multiple drafts of these application essays. That's where I come in, offer writing workshops, one-on-one writing support. These tend to take several iterations before they're polished and they truly represent who you are. So expect that if you move forward with any applications. So before I open it up to questions, because I want to make sure I give enough time to see if there are any questions, I wanted to highlight some examples of fellowship opportunities, again, that my office supports, promotes, and are really good fit for a lot of our graduate students, depending on the discipline and background. And so again, here's a great example of Simone. She is in France right now teaching English in France, even during a pandemic. And that would be a program that is also open to interested graduate students after they complete their degree. But one that I've mentioned several times is the Fulbright US Student Program. We talk about Fulbright a lot, especially in my office, because we've had such great success with it at LMU. In fact, this year we had a record-breaking number of semifinalists, 18, whom we are now waiting to hear if they move forward to that finalist stage, meaning that they've been awarded the grants. And Fulbright is not just teaching English abroad. So some of you are probably like, I kind of don't want to keep hearing about teaching English abroad. Fulbright also offers research grants, independent research or creative project grants. So this is where you would design your own 9 to 12 month project in whatever discipline you're coming from. And you would conduct that abroad in over 140 countries. So there's over 140 countries available for the Fulbright program. So this really lends itself well to a lot of students because it's not discipline specific. You get to design that. As a graduate student, depending if your program has some sort of thesis or capstone, you might be able to conduct that research on a Fulbright grant. So conduct your research abroad. That's absolutely something you could look into for Fulbright. The third and final category under the Fulbright umbrella are graduate degree grants. So as I mentioned earlier, if you're planning to attend LMU for, say, a master's, but then you still plan to go on to a PhD or other terminal degree, Fulbright might be able to fund the first year or more of a PhD program abroad. So lots of options under Fulbright, especially if you're looking at an international experience at some time in the future. Another example, and this one would be more about your experience. So what are you bringing to the scholarship is the Davis Putter Scholarship Fund. This is for activists. And you can define that however you'd like. You can read more about their website. This is a $10,000 scholarship for activists. There are no citizenship requirements, so it's great for international students, US students, DACA students, etc. And this is actually due April 1st. So if you fit the bill and you have some activism work, you should check that out because you could then receive that funding for next year, next academic year. Then we have ones that are maybe region or location specific. So the California Latino Legislative Caucus Foundation offers a $5,000 scholarship every spring. In fact, the next deadline is June 1st, and graduate students who are California residents are eligible to apply. And again, you can apply as a prospective student if you are planning to start your studies next academic year. And so that could be a great option just to cover some costs of tuition or other fees. And then we have more discipline-specific fellowships. So like Google's Generation Scholarship is for aspiring computer scientists. And so if you're pursuing a graduate degree in computer science, that's a $10,000 award as well. Also quite competitive, but again, if you fit the bill, I say go for it. In fact, I usually encourage all of our students to make a goal for themselves to apply for at least one fellowship before they graduate from LMU, or if not, recently after, because I do work very closely with our alums. So task that for yourself is see what happens. A lot of students think they're not great candidates, and then I have a conversation. I'm like, oh, you'd be a perfect fit for this one. So keep that in mind. There are discipline-specific or program-specific fellowships. And then if you're looking for experience where you can demonstrate some leadership skills, some independent project skills, the Clinton Global Initiative University, CGIU, they are a year-long program where you develop a project related to CGIU's initiatives. For a year, and you get mentorship support. There might be seed funding for whatever you're proposing as well. So that's more of a hands-on project-based fellowship opportunity. And then finally, there are also fellowships for very specific populations. So AAUW is an international women's organization. So they offer fellowships for both US citizens as well as international students who identify as women in very specific disciplines, and some are more open and broad, but that's a great organization to check out. And there are others that might be offering fellowships based on race or ethnicity. And so there's a lot of options out there for different fellowships types. So I know this was a lot of information to take in, and what I will say is this is not meant to be an exhaustive list of opportunities for our graduate students. It is quite extensive and does depend on the individual, but I hope it's at least piqued your interest into the types of opportunities that my office promotes and supports for both our current students and alumni. So at that, I'd like to open it up to any questions, and you're welcome to put it in the chat box, or if you wanted to unmute yourself, I think we're a small enough group, that would be okay. And as you think of questions, I'm going to go ahead and put the PDF of the slides into the chat box, so you'll have access to those. Oh, Grisel, I think your question might have gotten cut off, because I just see we need to apply.
Oh, yes, sorry. So for clarification, when we try to apply for one program, so we need, at the same time, we need to apply for fellowship?
No, these are
Oh,
optional. This is just a service that LMU provides our students and alumni.
oh, so, but we apply for financial aid, other helps, and then we can apply for fellowship, and another time that apply for school.
Absolutely. So, I did put into the chat, hopefully you can access the PDF of the slides from today. Those will have links to the fellowships that I mentioned in today's presentation. I mean, you are absolutely welcome to apply for those on your own. You don't need the support of my office or another, university or college to help you. But once you are enrolled at LMU, that's really my job, is to make sure you have that support, because these applications can be a bit time intensive, and sometimes it's hard to know what they're looking for, and that's where I can help.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So
Welcome.
thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, go ahead.
A question. I'm working here in Pakistan, so I'm building a university, and so I also want to become a graduate, and become graduate and go forward for PhD.
Uh-huh.
So, what is there any opportunity or funding, teaching assistantship opportunity in your university, as I can get the experience for the institute learning and get the experience for teaching. So,
So
is there any opportunity in your university for taking assistantships?
yeah, so I think if I heard you, there's a little bit of noise, but I think what you're asking are there teaching assistant positions that available to LMU graduate students? And if that's your question, it's best to talk to the prospective program. I do know that we do have graduate assistantships, but I don't know if they're available in every college or discipline. So you should reach out directly to that school or college to ask. It did that answer your question? I'm sorry, it was kind of hard to hear. Might be easier if you type it in the chat if I didn't answer that.
Right answer, and I will find it. I will be come in touch with your college, engineering college. I'm basically I have got BS in telecommunication, and I have got also here admissions in MPhil 2 time in Pakistan, but due to some critical conditions, I have withdrawn from my.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to interrupt. I just can't hear you. If you could put it in the chat, I will see if I can answer you. Can you type it in the chat? Thank you. Sorry, it's the feedback at Zoom life. So Nancy asks, are there any fellowship opportunities that might suit students enrolling in the marriage and family art therapy concentration programs? I mean, the short answer is yes. There are fellowships that might not be specifically for that degree program, but there are other fellowships that you might qualify for. Again, for example, if you identify as a woman, you might be eligible for those AAUW fellowships. There are others, depending on where you're a resident, like that CLLF one for California residents. In terms of specific fellowships for marriage and family therapy, I'm not aware of any off the top of my head, but I'm sure there are ones through professional organizations that, again, either my office or that program specifically should be able to point you in that direction. And then Griselle, yes, I put the slides in the chat. Were you able to see those? I don't know if she had left, maybe. Oh
no. I can see it. It's why, yeah, because I can see it, so I can find it.
Okay, so you let me know. Otherwise, I'm happy to send it to. I can send it to Emily to send out to all the students who registered for today.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. Great question. Isn't the fellowship's primary criteria GPA? For average GPAs, are there any fellowships? That's actually a common misconception. Not all fellowships have a minimum or even any requirement for a GPA. So Fulbright, which is one that I mentioned, has no minimum GPA requirement. I also think that a lot of the other ones I mentioned in today's presentation, the minimum GPA is usually about a 3.0, which I'm guessing that might be an average GPA. But if you are coming from an undergrad, and I personally really can speak to this because I had a very poor experience with my undergrad, so I came out with a very low GPA. There are still fellowships available, and especially if you've had some additional experiences, or even if you wait until after the first semester of your grad program where you might have a higher GPA, that could open up additional fellowships for you. Another great question. Let's see here. So Ali, you're saying I've done a BS telecommunication and want to get MS. Is there any teaching assistantships at any of your colleges? So once again, you'll have to reach out specifically to the graduate program that you are seeking to enroll at LMU. So if it's through the Seaver College of Engineering, you'd have to reach out to them to ask about teaching assistantships. And then my office does help with the Truman Scholarship, but that is only for undergraduate students. So if you are a current undergraduate student, that is something that is only open to undergraduate students who are juniors. And so at this point, we're looking at students who are sophomores going into junior year next year. Yeah, that one's a real specific criteria. It's one shot at it your junior year of college. Any other questions I can help answer about fellowships? All right, so we are just at time. I will put in my email in the chat if anyone has additional questions and you weren't able to access those slides. We will get them to you one way or another, but this is my email. Feel free to reach out with questions about fellowships, or like I said, if you do have questions about that, our doctoral program in the School of Ed, I'm happy to share my experience with that. So thank you all so much for joining me today, and I hope you had a wonderful time getting to know our graduate programs. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you very much. Thank you.